Hi, this is Randal Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Jonathan Bennett joins me. We're going to be talking about the CII Best Practices Badge update. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randal Schwartz and Jonathan Bennett. Episode 550, recorded October 12, 2019. CII Best Practices Badge Update. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. Worldwide Technology's advanced technology centers like no other testing and research lab, with more than $500 million of equipment, and it's virtual so you can access it 24/7. To learn more and to get insights into all that it offers, go to wwt.com/twit. And by Hover. Use a domain name that truly represents you and your passion. Visit hover.com/twit to get 10% off your first purchase of any domain extension for the entire first year. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, Libre, open source software. I am your host, Randal Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, little projects you may be using every day and not aware of it, projects you might want to download right after the show, or today's show is a little bit different because we're going to be talking about a certification for your open source software. Joining me once again is my lovely and talented co-host, Jonathan Bennett. Jonathan, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Randall, it's good to be here once again. It seems like it's been so long since I've been on the show, a whole 3 weeks at least.
3 weeks or so, yes, right. And I am once again coming to you from the kitchen set, as I like to call it, in Tijuana. And I'm told that my housemate has moved a number of the magnets around. So it's no longer a challenge of which one magnet got moved. It's like a ton of magnets got moved, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm down here this week. It is the Tijuana Tequila Festival, which I'll be heading to this afternoon to get all sorts of food and to restock the tequila cabinet over there on the floor. But anyway, so we have, I believe, it's his 5th time back, the 5th time for David Wheeler, who is going to be talking to us about it's sort of a repeat episode, talking to us about the badge that you can put on your website to say, I follow the best practices. And apparently it's been a bunch of updates since the last time he was on. So he wanted to come back on and talk about that. So he was last on episode 389, which was a while back. And he's going to be talking to us about what's happened, and particularly that there are thousands of more projects that are actually signed up for that. So what do you know about this so far?
So, yeah, I've gotten a chance to look a little bit at the project, and it serves as a couple of things. It serves as one kind of a checklist for developers. You know, what are the things that an open source project should be doing? What are the things we should have thought of to make sure are in place? It's a checklist that you can go through. And then the other thing that it serves as is kind of a mark of authenticity, or a mark of quality that the public can see and go, oh, you know, this open source project, they care enough to go through and do these things. It's probably going to be a high quality project. So those are the two things that I see that it works to do. It looks pretty neat.
Yeah, and I signed up for it, but I never actually put the badge on my website yet. But it's kind of cool. So we're going to have David come on in a few minutes and talk about that. But before we do that, I do have an important message, because this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Worldwide Technology. WWT began building their Advanced Technology Center, ATC, 10 years ago and has grown exponentially. The lab contains more than $500 million in equipment. It's like no other testing and research lab. WWT is a trusted partner who stays with you over the years. Many of their customers have been with them for over a decade. They know WWT is where they can go to get answers they need to make sure their business runs right. Their ATC is an incubator for IT innovation. Hundreds of on-demand and schedulable labs represent the newest advances in multi-cloud architecture, security, networking, primary and secondary storage, data analytics, and AI, DevOps, and so much more. Learn about products before you launch. WWT's engineers use these environments to quickly spin up proofs of concepts and pilots using the sandbox, so customers can confidently select the best solutions. In many cases, this reduces concept time from months to weeks, which increases speed to market. They offer lab as a service, a dedicated lab space within the ATC. Here, customers can perform programmatic testing using the vast technology ecosystem that WWT has already built. It's virtual, so you can take full advantage of ATC's unique benefits anywhere in the world 24/7. WWT engineers work in those labs every day, beta testing new equipment and building reference architectures and custom integrations to help their customers make decisions and see results faster and with less investment. The time is finally here. WWT has launched their new digital platform encompassing the ATC ecosystem. This ecosystem, it creates a multiplier effect of knowledge, speed, and agility anytime, anywhere around the world with their customers. Get access to articles, case studies, hands-on labs, and other tools that make the difference in today's fast-paced world. To learn more about worldwide technology and join the ATC ecosystem, go to wwt.com/twit and create an account today. WWT simplifies the complex. That's wwt.com/TWIT. WWT, delivering business and technology outcomes around the world. And we thank WWT for their sponsorship of FLOSS Weekly. And let's go ahead and bring on David Wheeler. David, welcome back to the show.
Hey there, and good afternoon.
Hey, and this is, I think, your fifth time on the show?
I think that's right. I should have gone back and checked on, but I've been on this show several times before, and it's great to be back.
Good. And so what's changed in the CII badge since the last time we talked to you?
Okay. Well, let's see. I actually wrote down the number here. Let's see. It was episode 389 back in 2016 when, and that was when the CII Best Practices Badge was first starting out. And at the time that we talked, let me in fact do a quick recap for those who may not be familiar with the badging process. Back. Actually, I guess it was 2014, there was the Heartbleed vulnerability. And although people had talked about the potential problems of vulnerabilities in open source software before, I think that caught a lot of people's attention. And the Linux Foundation said, well, there needs to be something that can be done here. And there's several different things that can be done. But one was, we need to capture what the best practices are and encourage projects to do them, find a way for users to find out which projects are trying to do the right thing so that we can reduce the likelihood of vulnerabilities, reduce the impact when they happen. And so that's really the starter of the Best Practices Badge. So May 2016, we had a launch. It was a list of criteria, a website where you can sign in, fill in basically a form. It automatically tries to figure out some of the answers for you. And then you can show everybody, yes, verily, I have a badge. So that was back in 2016. At the time, we weren't sure if there'd be uptake, although we certainly hoped that there would. And there certainly has been. I don't know the exact numbers at the time, but I think we talked around May 2016. There were about 50 projects that were participating. I just looked at the website this morning. We've got 2,705 projects participating this morning, and 360 projects have earned the badge. So that's tremendous take up. And I, A, thank everybody who's participated, and B, if you haven't, I really would like to encourage any open source software project to participate if you're not doing that already. So that kind of catches us up. Now, now to answer your actual question, what's changed? Obviously, one is, of course, lots more participation. One of the other big things that's changed is we have 2 new badge levels. So we've been calling the badge level that we started with the passing level, and then we created 2 new levels since then, the silver and gold levels, which, in order to get a silver badge, one of the requirements is you have to have a passing badge. And for the gold badge, one of the requirements is you have to have a silver badge. So they tier up in a pretty simple, clear way. And so I want to encourage projects to get badges. And if they've already got a badge, I'd certainly encourage them to at least get a silver. And for those projects that can manage it, a gold badge. And we can talk about what the differences are and what's in them, if you'd like.
So now you're going to have me step up to get even better. I mean, this is like, getting Delta Diamond, right? It's going to be like I have to work my way towards the higher levels.
Well, that is the intent. Now, to be fair, we encourage people to get the highest levels that they can. We've still been emphasizing a little more the passing level, not in the sense that we're ignoring silver or gold, but for projects that don't have any badge. Some projects, they go look at the criteria and say, oh, we're doing all those, and it takes very little time for them to show that, and they get a badge, and it's great. For a number of projects, though, there's something that they're missing, and it takes time. And so in many ways, the projects which don't have any badge are the riskiest ones. And so we've been emphasizing trying to get those onboarded. Now, once they've got a passing badge, they know the overall process. And we certainly encourage those projects to get a silver or gold. But you don't have to start immediately and say, I'm going to get gold tomorrow. That's not realistic. It's much simpler to say, I'm going to start now and just work your way through. I've even done an analysis of, you're curious about where people tend to not get a passing badge, at least to start, if we'd like to talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, so what are the differentiations between the levels?
Okay, well, let's talk about the silver and gold. So and passing. So passing is what at least our notion is, what should a well-run open source project typically do? And there's actually 66 criteria. Most projects meet most of them, and then there's a few that any one project may a large number of projects may meet it, but there's also a significant number which don't for some reason, and then they hopefully will work on those things. I pulled up just a couple of the silver criteria so you can get an idea of, basically silver is a harder level to achieve. You're taking more effort to do things to reduce the risks of defects in general, vulnerabilities specifically, and frankly also just trying to make sure that the project is going to stick around. So, for example, in the example of long term, the project has to clearly define what's called the project governance model. How do you make decisions? You don't want a project which can't figure out how to make a decision. And when there's only one person, that's not so hard. But as soon as there's multiple people, I mean, is it BDFL? Is it something else? Tell us how you do this. We want projects to be able to continue if someone dies. I mean, that's an unfortunate reality. Now, for silver, we still want single-person projects to be able to achieve it. So we say, hey, you can achieve this if you provide your crypto keys somewhere, say in a lockbox. You use a will to provide any legal rights if those are needed, say for DNS. But basically, find some way so that when you die, your project doesn't just die with you. We require automated tests, and it has to have at least 80% statement coverage. We can have a long conversation about the pros and cons of statement coverage as a measure. You can have 80% statement coverage and lousy tests, but I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. If you can't at least read 80% test coverage, you have a lousy test suite. At the passing level, we require you have a test suite. At the silver level, we're now adding you got to have this much coverage. So let's see here. Oh, and another one, and this really hits on the vulnerability kinds of things. The project results must check all their inputs for untrusted inputs to ensure that they're valid against a whitelist. You got to cryptographically sign releases and provide what's called an assurance case. Give me some reason to believe you why you think your software is actually secure. Oh, I can think of another one. You've got to use at least one static analysis tool to look for common vulnerabilities. And you also have to monitor external dependencies to detect known vulnerabilities and fix them. So, I mean, that gives you an idea of, we certainly would love to see all projects doing that. We didn't, for various reasons, require that at the passing level, but to get a silver level, those are some of the additions. And hopefully you can see, gee, that would be work. But hopefully for each of those, you can see why someone would care about those things. And all these criteria were proposed and have gone through lots of different reviews and so on. And particularly, we wanted to make sure that these were reasonable criteria. Oh, I should mention, you asked about gold. So examples of gold is you got to have two-factor authentication for your developers. This has been a problem for some of the more recent attacks where somebody's password got found and all of a sudden malicious code gets in there. For gold, you've got to have a bus factor of 2 or more. Basically, we're requiring now that there's just somebody there who can just immediately take over. We realize that's harder for some small projects to handle, which is why we put the gold level. But it's something people who use the software would really like to see. You got to have a reproducible build. I need to be able to show that I can generate exactly the same results so that if someone slips in something malicious, anybody else can confirm whether or not that the source code and the binary actually correspond. And you got to have hardening mechanisms, basically to reduce the likelihood that a defect becomes a vulnerability. So, there's actually a little more to it, but the idea is silver is harder but achievable for a single person. Gold is even more strenuous. And really, we're expecting a lot of those are going to be more for multi-person projects, because there's a lot of multi-person projects. Long answer to a simple question, but I hope it made sense.
Hey, David, I want to jump in if I can. And yeah, that made a lot of sense. So some of these are really specific criteria. Is it fair to say that because the world of open source runs such a wide gamut that some of these just don't really apply to certain projects?
Sure. And in fact, we for a number of these things, we have an answer of not applicable. So, and in fact, some of the criteria even say if X, then you must do Y. But we tried very much to focus on criteria that were general purpose. A couple of them, you're absolutely right, are some more specific. But even the ones you think, hey, they only apply in certain conditions, like building. Well, nobody builds. I'm using JavaScript. I don't build. What do you think minification is? What do you think Babel does? The terminology that some people use varies, but for a lot of these things, it turns out that they apply to, we really have tried to make them either applicable to everybody or make it obvious that they don't, and you can say NA and move on. But things like, for example, two-factor authentication. I'm sorry, anybody can do two-factor authentication. I totally understand that it's extra work, it takes some time, but it's a one-time cost. And you go do it, it's a pain, and then it's done. And then you move on. And that eliminates a whole lot of supply chain attacks where people basically, developers have had their accounts broken into. And for some developers, having their accounts broken into has a devastating effect on a lot of people. So we want to prevent that to start with. Does that kind of answer your question?
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
I noticed looking through the criteria, you use capitalized words like should, must, That is taken directly from the RFC language, isn't it?
It certainly is. We even referenced the RFC. So absolutely. But a lot of us are familiar. I mean, people who develop software are familiar with RFC language. So it just made sense to use the RFC language. So must means or must not means what you think it would mean. Should and should not also means what we did add one additional level, suggested. That's not in the RFCs, and we explain what that's about. Basically, it's things we'd like you to do, but there's so many different reasons they don't really apply. Then you can say, no, I don't do that, and move on. In that case, we're really depending on, what can I say, human psychology. Nobody wants to admit they don't do something when it's pretty obvious they should do something. And all your answers are public. So whenever you say, hey, we don't do this thing, everybody can see they don't do that thing. And for a lot of people, they would rather go and, well, I don't do that thing and I probably should, and I'll go fix that. But if that's not a reasonable thing to do, that's fine. That's why we put it in that category of suggested.
Yeah, that's useful. Thinking back to my original statement about this, for a checklist, I'm sure there's some of these things on this criteria list that developers look at it and go, I never thought about doing that, but that's a really good idea. That probably happens quite a bit, doesn't it?
Oh, it absolutely does. And actually a number of that happens a lot. And really one of the great things about trying to make a broad checklist across all open source communities, and boy, are there a lot of them, is different communities have emphasized over the years different things. And what's great is that when you try to create a single checklist, it takes the wisdom that's been built up over the years from different groups and basically gives that cross-fertilization. I will say that some I haven't thought about it. The other that I hear a lot is, yeah, we've been wanting to do that for years. Well, we have been saying we should do that for years. I'll even call out an example. They've already said I could give us an example. The OWASP Zap people make a tool. It's widely used. It's a good tool. They didn't have a test suite. They didn't have a test suite for years. And it's one of those things of, we really should have a test suite. We really should have a test suite. Nobody disagreed that there needed to be a test suite. But one of the criteria for the badge is you have to have a test suite. And they really wanted a badge. And they said, it's not that you're wrong, it's that we haven't done it. And so they built a test suite, and of course they're saying, as I think a lot of us who work with projects with test suites go, oh man, I'm so glad that you encouraged us to finally do this thing. It's been really helpful. And that's the kind of story we love to hear. And as you can imagine, having a test suite means that the software is more likely to be better for the end users.
And so what is the process of, hey, here's a suggestion, and well, is this something that should be part of one of the badges? How does that process go? And because it's all right, I'll cut to the chase. There are some things in there that maybe are controversial. So one of the things that's in the silver and the gold are a code of conduct. And boy, back a year or two ago, that was something that the internet was just kind of going crazy about. And what does the process look like to look at something like that that's, say, controversial and make the decision? Well, should we talk about this, or should we just wait and see what happens? What does that look like?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let me start with the simple. Well, I mean, process questions are a whole lot easier than let's talk about about specific. But in fact, we have to do that too. So basically, the CII Best Practices project is an open source project. So if you want to propose that something happen, the answer is we actually, and it's actually hosted on GitHub. So file an issue, and we can talk about adding, removing, changing, whatever. A lot of the issues that we've been processing, frankly, are more of the programmatic, kinds, but improving user interface or whatever. But for adding or changing a criterion, changing a criterion or adding criterion, we view as a big deal. We actually have different levels. Adding a criterion, particularly at the passing level, is a big deal because you're impacting a lot of projects. So we only want to do that very occasionally. We don't do that very thoughtfully. And the process is basically for creating or changing your criterion or adding it, you file an issue. For something like that, it goes onto a mailing list. There's a lot of discussion back and forth. Often there's a lot of discussion to figure out how to broaden it. So let's go specifically on the code of conduct. There's and in fact, actually, let me step back a little bit because I can actually analogize this a little bit to an earlier thing, which is licensing. This thing is designed for open source software. So it needs to be open source software. And one of the criterion for passing is the software has to be under an open source software license. We suggest that be an OSI approved, but it needs to meet the criteria. Similarly, but we don't mandate a particular license. If you want to use the GPL v2, that's great. If you want to use MIT, that's great. If you want to use CC0, that's great. So we're flexible in the details, but and really in many cases we focus on, please make it clear to others. Similarly with governance models, we don't require a particular governance model. You could use a BDFL, you could use a voting group, whatever. You just got to tell people at the silver level what you're doing. Similarly for code of conduct, there's a lot of discussions about what should be in a code of conduct. You know what? Let's just say you've got to make it clear what your code of conduct is. And that's it. Now, we can argue what should be in there, what should not be in there. One of the challenges, actually, I've seen is that what's big in, say, the US, looks very, very different in Japan. So what we'd focus is, tell us what your code of conduct is. That's the criterion. And there are certain code of conduct that are more common. We list a few if you've never heard of code of conducts, although really, so that's how so basically we're trying to make it so that you at least think about it, make it clear. And that also makes us a whole lot more future-proof because we're not focusing on extreme minutia. I mean, I'm sure some people will disagree on anything being minutia, but there's no way to win. But at the very least, please make it clear to all your potential collaborators, potential users, what's going on. And I think that clarity in many cases resolves a lot of problems to start with. And even if it doesn't, at least it's clear. And for example, you hate the project, fine, you can fork it. That's one thing that all open source software licenses allow. You can do other things, but at least you know what the situation is. And I think that that's a first step.
So for many of these things, kind of the viewpoint is, look, this is going to be an issue. You need to at least deal with it to some extent. And then to tag on that, would something like the Code of Merit, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, would that satisfy that criteria of having a code of conduct?
Oh, tell me more here.
I'm not sure we really have time to dive all the way into this. Randal might jump in and interrupt me from talking about this.
Let me beg off that question because I don't know, and I can do some research and try to find out. Okay,
that'll work. And I think Randal is going to jump in now.
Okay.
That was our follow-up. There he is. Sorry, Randal.
Oh, sorry. I didn't hear my cue here. All right. Well, I want to keep asking more questions, but before we do that, I do have another important message because this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Hover. Hover is a jumping off point for many entrepreneurs, and they want you to start your business with a domain name that truly showcases who you are. Hover has over 300 domain name extensions to choose from when building your brand online. No matter what you want to build, there's a domain name waiting for it. If you're a designer or a creative professional, you can use .design instead of being a generic .com or .biz domain name. By using .design, you're telling everyone exactly what you want to do. Stand out and brand yourself online with the perfect domain name for you or your business. You'll find excellent technical support available to answer any questions you may have. Their support team won't upsell you. They'll work hard to get you online. Hover has free WHOIS privacy protection, a clean and easy to navigate UX and UI, monthly sales on popular top-level domains. It's not hard to see why Hover is a popular choice for people starting all kinds of businesses. Keeping your domain name separate from hosting gives you the flexibility to choose the right platform for your business. I personally am a Hover customer. I have, I think, 15 domains with them now, so it's very cool. Use a domain name that truly represents you and your passion. Visit hover.com/twit to get 10% off your first purchase of any domain extension for the entire first year. That's hover.com/TWIT for 10% off your domain extension for a full year. And we thank hover.com for their support of Floss Weekly. So I'm sort of curious, actually, about what benefit this having this badge has for my project.
Well, I think Jonathan actually hit it on the head earlier. I think.
Okay.
You know, it helps developers. It helps potential users, and really, I would say potential developers and potential users. A lot of these requirements or the criteria, whatever you want to call them, all the criteria are focused on making the project work better. Things like testing, static analysis, dynamic analysis, where you've got various mechanisms to detect mistakes earlier before they hit your users. Ideally, of course, nobody makes mistakes. I'm not in that camp. I don't know anybody who's in that camp. So. Yeah. Since people are going to make mistakes when they're developing software, we need mechanisms to help us detect the problems early before they get out the door. As well as things like being able to report back vulnerabilities when they do happen. In fact, I did analysis. We can talk more about this. But one of the things that's happened since we first talked earlier in 2016 about the project is we can watch and see what projects are struggling with in terms of the passing criteria. So we really encourage projects to just get started and start filling the form. You don't have to have all the answers before you start. In fact, I think trying to do it all at once is a bad idea. It's better just to try to take things, start and take things incrementally. And the number one problem we've got right now, and I back off, we look at projects that are 90% complete, but don't have a passing badge yet. Right. And I did this analysis earlier this year, and there were like 265 projects that were in that state. They had gotten very close, but didn't quite get over the bar. And the number one criterion they had trouble with, they didn't meet yet, was the vulnerability report process. In other words, tell everybody how to report a vulnerability. And the funny thing is that's a one sentence in your README or your security.md file. Right. It's super easy to implement, but it's a really common problem. And when you talk to the security analyst community, particularly the folks who are trying to report back, I found a vulnerability. They can't figure out how to report a vulnerability back because is it okay to just post on a public issue? A lot of projects probably don't want that, but there's no way to tell. And so you end up with this conversation about how to have a conversation first. And when you're trying to get a vulnerability report out to a project and get it fixed quickly, having to do this meta discussion about how to report vulnerabilities, this is the wrong time. So that's the number one problem. And as I said, it's a trivial thing to fix. One sentence on a README or in a security.md file. When you find a vulnerability, this is how I want you to tell me about it.
Well, is that something that you might want to add to your criterion, which is have
it's in
easily available? It is.
Oh yeah, it's vulnerability _report _process. It's the most common missed criterion. and the thing is, as I said, it's super easy to fix.
Apparently,
but that's absolutely the kind of thing where people are going through the process, and most of them, I do that. I do. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Because most projects, until they've had a vulnerability reported to them, they don't think, oh, wait, how do I have a vulnerability reported to me? I'll add, by the way, the second most common one is not adding tests as you add functionality. Now, I don't think I need to convince too many people that you should be adding tests. We don't care if they're added before, like TDD style, or after, but you should be adding tests as you add at least major functionality. And everyone says, oh, yeah, we should do that. Do they do it? No, we don't. Should you? Yes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But it's usually not a problem to convince people to do it. Sorry, it's a good thing.
Yeah. How did you come up with this? Is this something that was your initiative, or is this something that you and a bunch of people got together and said, let's do this?
Well, let's see. That's a great question with probably a complicated answer. I personally have been really interested in this since, well, I've been interested in how did I develop secure software for many decades. Probably shouldn't admit how many. But really since the, I guess, middle or early 90s, I've been trying to look at, well, gee, what should projects be doing? So I have been internally just kind of looking around. And then when the CII Best Practices, and I wrote a book about how to write secure software. And when the Linux Foundation CII said, hey, wait, we really want you to go and create a real list. I had some starter information, but I don't want to just use David Wheeler's list. I don't really want this to be David Wheeler's list. So I went out and we did research. We looked at lots of well-run projects, SQLite and various other projects, the Linux kernel, curl. Talked to lots of different projects about what they do, how they do it, what are the kinds of things they do to reduce the likelihood of vulnerabilities. I spent a lot of time talking with Carl Fogel, who literally wrote the book on how to develop open source software.
Okay.
So, and after all that, basically created a starter list, and then over a period of many, many months, had a lot of refinements and reviews and comments and so on. I lead the project, but in many ways, I view my role as collecting the wisdom of the open source community writ large. Really, all the different open source software communities, because different communities have figured out over time different things that really seem to work. And there's a subset of those things that should work across most or all communities. And that our goal is basically to mine the expertise all around the world. And as I said earlier, we are ourselves an open source project. If there's something that you think we've missed that should be added, please file an issue. Let's talk about it.
Indeed. We're almost out of time. Is there anything we haven't said yet that you want to make sure our audience is aware of before we have to let you go?
I think the main thing I really want to convince people is if you are a developer of an open source software project, please go to the website, get the badge. I'm just going to, although I know it by heart, I'm still going to read it off just to make sure I get it right. So it's bestpractices.coreinfrastructure.org. Bestpractices.coreinfrastructure.org. It'll jump you immediately to your language of choice. Actually, that's something else we've added recently is support for many different natural languages. So you can read the criteria in a variety of different languages, Chinese, a number of different ones. And go start. You don't need to meet all the criteria. Just, find someone in your project to be willing to start that process. If you're already well run, it takes less than half an hour. If you've got issues, then you'll know right away, oh, wait a minute, I'm not testing. I'm not using any tools or whatever the issue is. Then you can decide whether or not you're going to do those. No one's holding a gun to your head and making you implement those criteria. But I think that once you start using them, you'll find that, yes, these criteria do make sense. And if you're a potential user of open source software, and that includes other open source software projects, use this criteria, this badging thing as a way to try to winnow out the good projects from the not so good ones. Now that we're starting to get more and more participating projects, it starts to make sense to prefer one project which has a badge and the other that doesn't. We're not going to just eliminate all the vulnerabilities, but we're going to make it so that they're much less likely, they're going to have less impact, and they'll be fixed much more rapidly when they happen.
And I like that it's not about making these perfect. It's about making these good. And,
right.
That's the important thing, right?
I think it is. Anything made by humans is going to have some sort of imperfection. I mean, that's the nature of all of us.
Right.
But we can make it so that, in spite of those imperfections of both the people and things we make, we can make it so that they're good enough for purpose, that they're unlikely to hurt people. And I think if we back down to more reasonable goals, we're way more likely to actually succeed. And so this whole project is very much focused on being pragmatic, but trying to raise that bar. And hopefully that comes across.
And I know I asked you this on the previous 4 shows you were on, but when is this going to incorporate blockchain?
Well, as a matter of fact, we already have blockchain projects. So so that your drinking game buddies are going to have to take a couple sips.
Okay.
But yeah, there's Hyperledger is one of the projects. In fact, they have a badge, and they're even if you go to the front page, we show some of the badge earners, and Hyperledger is listed right at the front, as well as Linux, Kubernetes, Node.js, LibreOffice, curl, GitLab. I mean, so we've got blockchain. We got lots of different kinds of projects covered.
Cool. And what's your favorite scripting language?
Okay. I always struggle with this one. It's probably Python, but I do like Ruby and I do like Bash.
Okay. All right. And your favorite text editor?
My favorite text editor is the correct editor, as you know, Vim.
Oh,
yeah, you knew you were going to get 0 for 2 from me.
Well, Emacs can emulate Vim, so it's okay. It's all good.
It certainly can. I have used Emacs a number of times. It's a good editor. I'm really saying that because I know that's not the answer you wanted to hear. I
know. Hey, David, I think you're our first 5-time repeat, so I think we're in good space here. So thank you for coming back again and talking to us more about the CII badge. And let's keep a conversation going.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. That was David Wheeler talking to us about the CII badge. What do you think there, Jonathan?
Super interesting. Like most of our shows are. We didn't get to actually ask him about it, but I think it's fascinating that they've taken these best practices and they've gamified them. So now you have this badge that you can earn. You have 3 levels of it, and it's this gamification idea that it's kind of, it gives us the juice. It drives us to try to get that next thing, and I think that's really fascinating that's the direction they've taken this.
But it's more than that. It's actually like, here are the goals that you'll need to achieve to be able to get to this level coming up. And I like that. I like that people understand that there are goals for this stuff. So, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's great to have this checklist. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of things on there that I'm aware of, I've tried to do, but there's things on there that you look at and you go, oh, well, that is a good idea. I don't know if I would have thought of that being here on my own. Even their inclusion of code of conduct, it's something that you need to think about as part of your project, whichever side of the fence you're on. And I think it's great that they're trying to do these things that are best practice, and even that they have kind of this neutral philosophy about it. Like, they're not going to say, well, to really be a true open source project, you've got to use GPL. We don't want any of that MIT stuff around here. They don't do that. And I think that's perfect. I think that would kind of shoot themselves in the foot to take a silly stance like that.
I do like that they encourage an open source, an OSI approved license, though. And we're almost out of time, so I really got to start wrapping this up. But coming up soon, we have Camilio, which is the successor of OpenSCR and SCR. We've got Singularity coming up. We've got the Hacker Public Radio, which is going to be kind of fun because I'm actually going to be on their show. It's a different host every day of the week, which is kind of cool. Just added to the schedule, Hot Rock, which I don't have any notes about, but apparently it's pretty cool. And Kong is coming back. It's next generation API platform for multi-cloud and hybrid organizations. Sorry, I'm bumping my mic here. Hold on. LS Quick is coming on. That's just been added. And XWiki also just been added. Again, we're adding about 2 new shows every week, so that's not bad. But I could always use more shows. So if you have any projects that want to be on the show, just let me know. Just connect me up with the people. I've had a couple of emails from people who said, you should have this person on the show. Well, good. Get them to talk to me. That's how this works. Go to twit.tv/floss. That's the upcoming show list. We have a live stream at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time on a Wednesday, so live.twit.tv. You can follow us at Floss Weekly on Twitter. You can follow me at Merlin on Twitter. We also have a new forum at twit.community. So if you want to join there, I pay attention to that every day or two or so. I will be actually... tomorrow, I will be in Raleigh, North Carolina, for All Things Open. You can still register for that, and by using the code Floss Weekly, all lowercase, and get the most discounted rate that they provide for you. Also, I don't know what else I'm plugging. Actually, anything you want to plug there, Jonathan?
Sure. I will mention one thing real quick. I'm still kind of in stealth mode on this because it's not all done. But if you want to, you can check out patreon.com/JP_Bennett. And I am working on a Patreon to support some of my open source stuff. We mentioned it just a little bit in the pre-show, but special sneak peek just for Floss Weekly listeners that listen to the end of the show. You can go check out what I'm doing there.
Well, and I am going to go to the Tequila Festival later today, and I'm pretty much looking forward to that because there'll be lots of food, there'll be lots of partying, and there'll be lots of 140 vendors all giving me free samples, which is not going to be a bad thing. Anyway, so that's mostly why I'm here this weekend. So we're doing the good thing. Anyway, Jonathan, thank you once again for joining me, and especially at the last second, because you didn't actually know you were going to be on this show, apparently. But thank you for being on the show.
Yep, glad to be here.
All right, Jonathan, thank you much. And we'll see you all again next week. Well, I won't see you next week. I'm going to be flying while the show is going on. We've got 2 very capable co-hosts that are going to be taking over the show while I am flying. So we'll see you all again next week. Well, some of us will see you again next week on Floss Weekly.